And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. It's hard to believe we're halfway through summer and school starting is just around the corner. I hope you're getting all your summertime fun in, whether you're doing projects, going on vacation, having fun in the water, or sitting down with a good book. Today, I'm excited to talk to historical romance author Kelly Goshorn. Kelly sets many of her stories around real historical events, and I'm looking forward to learning more about them. She lives in Virginia and is also a wife, mom, and advocate for readers and writers of Christian fiction. Before we begin, I'd be honored if you would take a moment to follow me on social media. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin. I'm a pre-published author myself who also writes historical romance with a big dose of real history. So if you like Kelly's books, I hope you would like mine too. I also interview other Christian authors every week here on this show. So if you would follow me, you can keep up with who we're having on next. Now, let's bring in our guest. Hello, Kelly, and welcome.
Hi, Erin.
Your book, The Undercover Heiress of Brockton, releases August 1st. What can you tell us about this historical romance novel?
The Undercover Heiress of Brockton, which is a really long title, kind of, isn't it, is set in Massachusetts in 1905. The heroine in my story is an eccentric heiress who masquerades as Henry Mason, a male reporter for the Brockton Enterprise, which is a newspaper in Brockton, Massachusetts. To this day, there's still the Brockton Enterprise. And she does not like the fact that she has to put on a disguise as a male in order to get the good stories, the investigative, meaty stories. So that's something that kind of riles her. And so she does this because she wants to be a reporter. She also has a job where she uses her own name, but she writes for The Gilded Gown, which is a fictional magazine for women in the Boston society, which she loathes. She hates going to the garden parties and the tea parties to report on things in the Gilded Gown.
That's not really her favorite thing, huh?
No, it's not her wheelhouse. And then the hero, Leo Erickson, is a second-generation firefighter. And his dad is the station chief, and his brothers work in the same firehouse. And so he's really good-natured. He's very clever and brave. And, he's kind of smitten with Etta, but he struggles with wondering if a woman from her background, because she has money, she comes from a family with money, if they'll be able to build a future together. So that's kind of the gist of the story. They meet up she's trying to investigate a series of suspicious fires. And so she literally falls out of a tree on top of him. That's how they reconnect. I guess they did actually meet the year before at the fireman's ball because she's a benefactress to the fire department.
That's a great way to meet up.
Literally. Falling for you.
So with the fire and everything, would you say there are a few threads of suspense woven through it?
I wouldn't label it as historic romantic suspense, I think, like in the vein of like a Crystal Coddle. But I think there are some fast-paced scenes with the fire, the explosion at the Grover Shoe Factory that has that sort of suspense feel to it. But there really isn't, the danger kind of element lurking through this story like a suspense story might have.
And now you mentioned the Grover Shoe Factory fire, and I had never heard of this before, but when I read about it on your website, then I kind of went down a rabbit trail looking it up because I love real historical events that someone sets a good story around where I get to learn something where I read it. I mean, I love reading anything, but that kind of is just especially grabs me when there's a real event there. So what inspired you to set your story around this event?
So it's funny that you said that about going down the rabbit trail because that's kind of how it happened with me. So the publisher, Barber, they put out a call for stories. The initial concept was Disaster Days, so a story that would be based on a true man-made or natural disaster. And they already released 6 books in a different series called A Day to Remember. And I believe those are all, I could be wrong, but I think those are all natural disasters. And so this series all centers around a man-made disaster, so to speak. And so I literally Googled a list of man-made and natural disasters in America and had this whole list. And I started just clicking on different things. And when I saw the images of the factory, the Grover Shoe Factory was a massive 4-story building that took up most of a city block, just windows, glass windows all the way around it. And then the picture side by side next to it, everything was gone but the smokestack. I mean, just flattened. And then some of the buildings across the street on the next block caught fire and were completely burned to the ground too. So it was just completely gone. And I looked at that and I thought, how could anyone survive that? And when I read a little bit more about it, there were over 350, I think there's like 360 something people in the building. The explosion happened right as the workday started. So the building was full of employees and only 58 people died, not to diminish the loss of those 58. But when I looked at those pictures, I couldn't believe that anyone even survived.
Wow.
It was just a miracle to me. And so I was just kind of like you said, going down the rabbit trail, and I started reading about it and what caused it. And then I started hearing, like, they mentioned little stories about people both that survived and that didn't survive. And one woman, Dora Clark, it was her first day on the job.
Oh, man.
And she didn't survive.
Oh.
Another man, Ray Cole, his job, he worked for a water delivery company, and he was delivering water, and he was just there at the wrong time, and he did not survive. Stories about the priest, St. Margaret's Church was across the street from the factory, and he rushed out of the building and went into the burning building multiple times. I think it was more than 5 times, and rescued people before he eventually got injured and couldn't go back in. So just stories of bravery and the stories of loss, people that were trapped. There's a story of one man, I'm going to get their names mixed up. I think his last name was Abercrombie, whose legs were pinned. He could not get out. He was completely pinned, but he was able to use his upper body, and he was able to free several co-workers by moving debris that was trapping them so that they could get out. So I think I was just intrigued. I was really intrigued about what caused this and how did anyone survive it?
Yes. So really the human element, it sounds like, really grabbed you with this one.
Mm-hmm. Like you, I like the real history. I try to, weave that into my stories when I can.
Now, I was impressed when I was looking on your website. For readers who do like history, you have quite a few resources on your website about this story and other stories that you've written. So can you tell listeners a little bit about that? Like, what can they find on your website?
Well, I am a true unabashed history nerd girl, so I'll always incorporate some of that history. But for the Undercover Heiress of Brockton, right now I have the historical background of the story. It's essentially the author's note from the book. I changed it up to read a little bit differently, and I added photographs that I couldn't put in the book so that people could see some of the images. And that sort of helps you sort out fact from fiction in the story. There's also a link to some recipes from the book, and right now there's a link you could click on and listen to the 1905 recording of a song that Leo sings to Etta several times when he asks her to dance in the book. So that's kind of neat. Music and singing and recording so different than the way it is now. This event happened 125 years ago, actually, this past March. So that's kind of fun, to go in and see that. And I haven't published it on my website yet, but I'm also working on a page that will talk about what firefighting was like in 1905. There's a scene in the book that was cut because it was way too long. I do not have a problem with words, as you'll probably see from some of my answers to your questions. And I was able to put a little bit of it into the book, but there was a whole nother scene where Leo was fighting a fire, and you got to see that, just to remind the reader, there's no oxygen, their idea of fire protective gear is very, very different than what we think of for firefighting today. And many of the firefighters, they would take a bandana, dip it in water, and then put it over their mouth to sort of act as a filter for some of that smoke from, getting in their lungs. But there was this great scene. I learned some things about how the fire dogs worked. And I did put that into the book because I thought that was fascinating, how the dogs were trained to go get the horses, and they would sort of herd the horses into position And then they had ropes and pulleys that the firemen would use to position the harnesses over the horses once the dogs had them in position. And they would hook them up to the pump wagons that they would take, and then the dogs would run out and clear the bib, like the driveway,
Mm-hmm.
the access to the road, right? I'm trying to think of the right word, so that the people would be out of the way and that the fire truck wagons could get into the street and get on their way, because they're going to burst out of there to full gallop. So I thought that was fascinating too. So I kind of incorporated that.
Yes, things that have changed that, we might not even think about, but you're right. There's so much that is different from 120 years ago than we have today.
Right, right.
So, The Undercover Heiress of Brockton, as you mentioned, is part of the series from Barber that's called Enduring Hope. And each book is written by a different author, and some authors might repeat. Each story stands alone. Like you said, it's about its own specific story, but it is part of a series. So, I was just wondering, are you planning to release any more books in this particular series?
No, each of the 6 books is a different author in the Enduring Hope series. But some of the things that readers could look forward to, some of the storylines. The first book talks about the Chinatown riots in San Francisco. The third book will be about the stampede at the Shiloh Baptist Church Convention. One of them is going to be about 2 ships that collide in Halifax Harbor, the massacre at Wounded Knee, and the Hagenbeck-Wallace circus train collision. So there's lots of interesting stories that are going to be coming, and you can read one or all of them. They're not connected in any way storyline wise, but each one's going to look at how characters overcome tragedy with their faith, love and fortitude. So that's sort of like the overall theme that will connect this series.
So, speaking of faith, early reviews of your book that I was looking at online, they include mentions of the faith theme that you've woven into the story. Why is including faith important to you?
Well, for me, I think story is so powerful, and we see that, Jesus modeled that in telling story and how he could get points across. And I think, to me, that the power in fiction, especially Christian fiction, lies in that ability to convey spiritual truths to readers. I think it's a lot less threatening than picking up maybe a nonfiction book on a particular topic, and you have the opportunity sometimes to get the reader's attention in a subtle way, something that they might never have thought about through what the characters are going through. And to me, it's always my deepest prayer that God will use my stories to not only entertain, but to bless and challenge people in their faith, to grow them and point them back to Jesus and the redeeming work of the cross. So there's stories that are clean and unoffensive to Christians, which is wonderful too. But I think my stories, I wouldn't want to write, I think, if I couldn't include a faith arc in the story. To me, that's what makes it powerful, I guess, what makes it impactful.
Yes. Yes, I'm on the same page as you. I think it's wonderful that there are so many books out there, and it seems like more and more that are, clean stories and wholesome stories, but my favorite ones and the ones that I love to write myself all have a true faith element. It's just, kind of our heartbeat, and like I said, I'm so glad that there's so many others, and I know some people feel called to write that, and have someone who's not a Christian read some of their books without a faith element, but that are clean and then are drawn to other books too. So I definitely respect that as authors who are following their calling. But I'm glad every time, if I read a story without a faith element, it just seems like there's something missing,
Right.
So you share openly on your website about struggles you've had with your self-worth and self-image, which I think a lot of women can relate to. And you've written both a nonfiction short story and your debut novel, A Love Restored, around this topic. Has it been healing to you to share how God has met you in this area and ministered to your heart?
I think, yes, I think God did a lot of, not only through writing A Love Restored, I think, but the writing journey itself has brought healing, not only in this area. I mean, a lot of the healing from A Love Restored took place. I don't know if you know this. This is based on my true romance with my husband.
I did
So,
read that on your website, yes.
yeah. So a lot of that, a lot of the healing from those issues happened at the time, which was in the late 1980s. But God, over the years has continued to work with me in this area of self-worth. Just seeing myself as the whole woman, not just the outward appearance. And I think really allowing God to show me who I am instead of who I think I should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the writing journey, I was praying for God to give me a new passion in my life and a new direction. And I'm a little thick headed, and it took quite a while for me to realize that it was writing. And I thought, this is great. I have this new thing that I'm so excited about. I'm going to do it for God. And I did. But what God really is great at doing is like, okay, you're going to write. But what we're really going to do is we're going to work on your other insecurities of, your fear of failure and your fear of rejection and your, what everybody else thinks about you all the time. And we're going to blow that out of the water because there's nothing like writing to, everybody has an opinion.
Yes.
And, and I used to be not very good at receiving criticism. And, I always took that to be, I'm not good enough. And I think he's just done a lot with me through this journey. And through writing, I mean, where I'm at now, like my faith is just not the same. It is just completely different because I cannot do this without completely submitting and like on my knees, relying on God to do it because I can't do it. So,
yeah.
um,
So this journey has definitely been for you, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
know.
I always learn something in my stories when I'm writing, like that I need to learn.
Yeah. I think it's
So,
easy for us to think about when we're writing, to think about the readers, but it is such a ministry in our own lives and our journey with God.
mm.
And so it sounds like you have not always wanted to be a writer. So is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, it was never anywhere in my mind to write a book. I've always loved reading and loved being read too, but I never anywhere in my mind thought I would write a book. I mean, all my training, I have an undergrad degree in social studies education, and I have a master's of education and history. So all my writing was research papers. So completely different. And completely took me by surprise. I've always loved writing, but I never ever thought about writing a book. And so I was doing in-home daycare because I wanted to be home with my children. And I thought I would go back when they were all in school, that I would go back to teaching. But fear kept me at home because I put on a lot of weight having my babies and I was very insecure about going out into the work world. And I thought, I will just keep doing this. I mean, why not? It's successful. I like it, but I got to that place where I needed something different. And that's when we started praying, my husband and I in our small group, to pray for the next thing, a new direction and a new passion. I had no idea what it was. I did not think it would be teaching because I sort of felt like because I had reacted in fear, sometimes God just shuts the door. It's not punishment, but it's like consequences. Like you didn't trust me in this. Doesn't mean I won't give you something new, right? I'll raise up something new, but we're not going to go back here. And I did not see writing coming. And I started writing a book about a mail order bride because I think they're fast. I think that it just fascinates me.
Uh-huh.
And my husband was reading it, and he asked if he could read it, and I let him read it. And he said, well, this isn't bad, but you should write our story. And I looked at him and I said, you didn't look so good in that story for a long time. He said, I know. He said, I know, but, it's a good story and it needs to be told. And so I switched and started writing our story. And that's when it just exploded.
Uh-huh.
I just could not, any minute I had, I needed to be sitting working on the story. And it still took me a while to realize that was the answer. Like I said, I'm a little hard-headed. It took me a little while to realize that was the answer to the prayer. But yeah, that's sort of how that all came about. So
Yes. So on your website, you mentioned that you love BBC period dramas, and I also am a huge fan, and it made me smile when I saw that you have a picture of Margaret Hale from North and South, as one of your character inspirations, and North and South is one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time. So I thought we could just maybe take a minute and nerd out. And what what other BBC period dramas do you love?
Oh, I love that we have that in common. Well, I would say anything that, like, I'm a big Masterpiece fan,
Uh-huh.
and so I love all their versions of Jane Austen. Like, I'm a snob. I like the 1990s Colin Firth, Pride and Prejudice, The Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson. Like, I like the older ones. My husband watches these with me, so I know a lot of guys don't watch them with their wives, but he loves the historical programs. So we've watched and enjoy, like, Poldark. Victoria is one of my favorites, Downton Abbey. Right now, I'm a big fan of Miss Scarlet and the Duke and All Creatures Great and Small. We had the opportunity when we visited the United Kingdom a couple years ago, and I had the opportunity to visit Highclere Castle, where they filmed Downton Abbey.
Wow.
And my husband and I went to Grassington, which is this little village in the Yorkshire Dales where they do all the outside shots for All Creatures Great and Small.
Oh,
So we kind of nerded out there taking
yeah.
pictures everywhere.
And that's
That
such
was a
a
lot of fun.
beautiful area.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
that's
lot
so
of fun.
fun. Yes, I've watched many of those. I have not seen Miss Scarlet and the Duke yet, so that sounds like one I should check out.
Oh, that's so fun. It's like she's a Victorian crime solver. So that one's a lot of fun.
That's
Yeah.
good. And of course, I'm also a Jane Austen fan. And then North and South is by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I like her other ones,
Yes.
Wives and Daughters and
Yes.
Cranford. I like those a lot too.
hmm Yeah, and I'd have to give a shout out to Lark Rise to
Oh,
Candleford if
yes.
anybody has seen that. That's a really good one.
That is a fun one. Yeah, they're the little hub of their town at the post office there. They get all the news.
Right.
Oh, so fun. So, what are some of the other delights in your life?
Well, I have 3 adult children, and my daughter lives in California, so we don't get to see her as often. But I enjoy spending time with them. Our family loves to play board games. So whenever we're together, we're usually playing board games and talking and snacking. In fact, my son said to me, "What do normal families do?" Because, like, we always play board games together. So that's a big thing. I like to color. I've always liked coloring. It's very relaxing for me.
Uh-huh.
And I like to have a corgi puppy. We've always had a corgi as a pet, and so we have a 7-month-old corgi named Biscuit. So we're in the process of training Biscuit and trying to walk him, get him used to being on a leash and things like that. So
Yes.
it's pretty much fills my day. Of
Hmm.
course, reading. I mean, reading kind of
Oh,
goes
yes.
without saying, but most of my reading is audiobooks these days. I rarely give myself the pleasure to sit and read. I'm trying to work that into my Sunday afternoons, but like I said, we're typically playing board games. So
Uh-huh. That is fun. My family grew up playing quite a few games too, and both of like my both sets of cousins and grandparents and stuff, we played a lot of games. So, yeah, those even now, my family will like if my siblings get together, we'll visit for a while and then we'll probably break out a game too.
right, like we like to play. I grew up playing cards more than
Uh-huh.
games, but a lot of card games. So
So it's clear, another thing from your website that I learned that you love supporting Christian authors. And so if listeners were to visit your website, what kind of resources would they find that you have put together for fans of Christian fiction?
well, I have a tab on my website called My Toolbox, and I'm not sure if I need to like find a new name for that because it's probably the least visited section on my website. So maybe people are like, I don't know what that is. But I have a section there for readers of Christian fiction or any reader that wants to look at Christian fiction. And I have a list of all authors that I've read that I would recommend that you can go to and know you're going to get a solid Christian read with faith elements, that's going to keep you turning the pages. I also have lists of devotionals, podcasts, and Bible studies, all the things that I either listen to currently or have listened to or read or participated in that I would recommend. So there's lots there to look for in terms of maybe some Christian fiction recommendations. Also, if anyone's listening that's also wants to be a writer, there's some resources for writers as well under the same tab. You'll find a sub tab.
Well, that is great. I know I love getting to share about books. I was a book blogger before I kind of ventured into writing, and it's just that there's there's a certain kind of joy that comes from trying to introduce someone to their next favorite book, you know?
Right. It's like you can't help but get all excited. I mean, I've been taking physical therapy, and the young girl, there's two physical therapists, and the young girl, she's in her probably mid-20s. She loves books. So we're always talking about books, and I've been recommending Christian fiction to her. She was really excited when she found out I was a writer, and that's how we got talking about it. And it also gave me a chance to witness to her, because she was like, how did you get writing and everything? So I can tell her, sometimes I'm thinking, in my mind, I'll be thinking, okay, you asked.
Right.
So that's been kind of fun, but I recommended to her, I thought maybe the Gabrielle Meyer Timeless series would be, because she likes historical and the concept is so unique. So I thought she might really like that, and kind of be an introduction into Christian fiction that she might like. So I hope she reads those.
Yes. So is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
I loved that question when I saw it, and I thought that was really a neat question. And so I thought about that, and I thought the one that I've been clinging to a lot in this last few months, I've had a lot of medical issues come up, is Colossians 3:15, and about let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. I mean, the whole verse goes on, but that first part, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. I've just been clinging to that, that God is my rock. He's got this, and I want my life to better know what's going on. I want people to see peace and joy, because it's not dependent on our circumstances.
Right.
So.
And it's not something that comes from ourselves. It's the peace of God. It comes from Him.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Amen.
So how can readers connect with you?
If they want to see what I'm up to, I'm on Instagram, or they could find me on BookBub. Or I would love it if they would sign up for my newsletter. I put a newsletter out every month. You can find that on my website, kellygoshorn.com/newsletter. And I would love, love, love to have them subscribe to that and hear what I'm doing every month. And I love to, every month I highlight a new historical fiction or romance book. And I usually do a giveaway, and I'm usually talking about what's going on in my writing life. And I try to just keep giving people bits of, hope and joy. And sometimes I nerd out too, and I tell them a whole bunch of historical things. And
Well, that is great. Listeners, I hope you will go to Kelly's website. It is so full of information. There is something for everyone there. The reader, the writer, the fans of history. So let me spell her name for you. Kelly Goshorn, KELLYGOSHORN.com. Before we go, I'd also like to remind you that I'm a writer of historical romance based on real events as well. And though I don't have any books published yet, it would be absolutely wonderful to have you along for my journey, so you can be among the first to know when I do get something out into the world. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, or visit my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to sign up for my monthly newsletter. Until next time, happy reading!
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.